We have some big news to discuss today as the Toronto Maple Leafs continue to make some sneaky good moves ahead of free agency starting in just a few days as they have hired a new and their final coach to their staff alongside Craig Berube. So we're going to break that down in this episode, as well as the trade rumors. They continue to escalate for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and this one is regarding one of the top prospects in the NHL who could be looking to make his debut very, very soon. So stay tuned for all that, but before we do, if you're a part of the 80% who aren't subscribed, make sure to hit the subscribe button. We're very close to 11,000 subscribers, and we're going to keep you up to date with all the latest Leafs news. Because Darius, the NHL season is now officially over. Congrats to the Florida Panthers. Unfortunate for the Edmonton Oilers, but now that free agency is about to start, the NHL season is over. Things are really going to start ramping up, and it started a couple days ago. And let's start with the hiring of Marc Savard. We rumored this a few weeks ago. And it came true. We covered, obviously, the rumors. It was kind of going around for a while, but it finally finalized. So rumored for weeks, the Leafs announced hiring of Marc Savard as assistant coach. The hiring completes Berube's staff, which includes Lane Lambert, Mike Van Ryn, Savard, Curtis Sanford, Jordan Bean, and Sam Kim. So the coaching staff has continued to kind of, develop since Berube was hired. And now you can see on the screen here, all of his staff is set to go. And I'm very excited for, obviously, the season to start. One season ended, now we can start to look forward to the Leafs playing.
Yeah, it's really exciting that the Leafs you can finally put some names in place and kind of look at different styles and what they're going to do. And honestly, it's mostly the St. Louis Blues coaching staff from their Stanley Cup championship season or the one right after that, which was pretty good for them too. So not a bad thing at all for the Leafs. I'm very excited. And my pick for this position too, the last position, was Marc Savard. So personally, I'm really happy. I think he's going to do a lot of really good things with the Leafs personnel here. He has a lot of really good and new ideas that I don't think Guy Boucher was going to bring to the table if he came back, and obviously didn't last year. So he's going to get creative with it, right? When you look at the playoffs this year and you look at like the special teams for the Oilers, let's say, for example, the Leafs would have never been able to compete with that. So if you're bringing in new, fresh ideas with the same personnel, I think maybe it can start to get things going in a different way of thinking about the game. So I'm really excited about this hire specifically, and honestly, the whole coaching staff, because it almost looks like they're going to bring a no nonsense attitude, which I'm really excited for. Besides the special teams and all that, and one specific guy with Savard, I'm really excited to see the whole coaching staff in work, doing their work. So it's going to be fun.
Yeah, at the very least, it's going to be different hockey than what we've seen for the past few years with Sheldon Keefe, with Guy Boucher, and all of kind of those guys who have been going around. But yeah, it's very interesting. And again, new power play coach, Marc Savard. So there's a lot, and you mentioned it's kind of the same blueprint as with the Blues when they won their cup back a few years ago in 2019. But the big thing here is a lot of differences are happening for the team. The coaching staff is different, and whether they keep Mitch Marner or not, things are going to change. The way they play is going to change, and they have to. Mitch Marner is not, trading Mitch Marner is not going to be the one-stop solution to winning a Stanley Cup. The way they play wasn't working. The way their stars perform in the playoffs wasn't working. And ultimately, I think this is a good step in the direction of completely not only changing Sheldon Keefe and the head coach, but overhauling the entire coaching staff. And his philosophy with Marc Savard now is to trust his higher skilled offensive-minded players to be creative and free while on the attack. Constantly moving, breakouts. Things are going to be different for the Toronto Maple Leafs over the next few seasons, assuming that this coaching staff stays together. And that's what's exciting to me.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting, like I mentioned, especially for the power play with Savard, right? Like mentioned there, the philosophy is about to change. I found that the Leafs power play, never mind the penalty kill, which wasn't great too, but the Leafs power play was very stationary, and they were always looking for the same thing, which was the Matthews one-timer, right? And while I'm going to keep bringing it back to the Oilers because I love their power play so much, while the Oilers kind of do the same thing with Draisaitl, guys are always moving in and out in different positions, and they have different set plays for every single player on that power play. And I just didn't get that vibe from the Leafs last year. So I think Marc Savard is going to bring in a lot of new ideas, which is going to be exciting. And yes, he did not succeed with the Calgary Flames when he was there last year, but I attribute a lot of that to the personnel on that team. That is not a very good team, and the Leafs have a lot of really high-end talent that I think are willing to adapt. I think a lot of the guys on the team are going to be excited about trying new things.
Yeah. Let us know what your thoughts are on this. A very good signing. We're happy with it. We said it way back before it was official. And but let's move in to Rutger McGroarty. Now, Darius, this is very interesting here. He has been rumored, and Elliot Friedman has came out and basically said that he is getting shopped by the Winnipeg Jets and that a trade could be inevitable very, very soon. I had a couple of people tell me, be prepared for him to be traded prior to the draft. And this was a couple of days ago. And even yesterday, there was a lot of rumors that came up about McGroarty. This is a proposed trade that we saw. and I'm curious what your thoughts are. It's an early second and McGrody for Fraser Minton, Nick Robertson, a first and a fifth. I'm gonna get your thoughts on it first. And the Leafs, again, it's not an official report that the Leafs are actively pursuing him, but the Leafs have continued to be linked to McGrody, and it makes a lot of sense. And I think he is very open to playing in Toronto as well. So, what are your thoughts on this proposed trade here?
I think for the Leafs, it makes a lot of sense. Nick Robertson, I don't want to say he's hit his ceiling, but in Toronto, I think his time might be nearing its end, right? I do wonder what he looks like under Berube, but I think the Leafs might be ready to move on from that player. And McGrody, like you mentioned, coming in, he would be a really good player for the Leafs. Like that would be a pretty decent fit. And he's still very young. He's only 20 years old, hasn't played in the NHL just yet. And then when you look at Fraser Minton, I think he's going to be a really effective player at the NHL level, but maybe a third line center. Like he's not going to be a high end scorer or anything like that. So I wonder if you can acquire those if you need them down the road, right? At the trade deadline or what have you. So I think, on the Leafs side of things, that makes a lot of sense. The first round pick is a little steep too to send the other way, but obviously the Jets are going to want some high end talent back. But this is a player who had a really good year last year in Michigan. So his numbers at that level, like obviously the numbers are skewed. A lot of people are used to like these high end NHL numbers, like he only had 60 points or something like that. So they're obviously used to that, but he had a really good season. He's going to be a really good player in the NHL. So if the Leafs are linked to him, if they can make it work for a player like Nick Robertson, for example, even Fraser Minton, as long as you're not touching Cowan, right? I think you're in play there. I think that's a good move.
Yeah, Cowan is the untouchable one, but McGrody is one of the most highly touted prospects right now, especially after a season last year, which he put up some incredible, almost record-setting numbers. But yeah, you mentioned it. Nick Robertson, he was floated in a deal for Jacob Markstrom literally a week ago, so clearly they're willing to move him. Fraser Minton's ceiling is second line. I mean, his ceiling's probably a first line, but realistically, his most likely outcome is somewhere between third and the second line. And with McGrody, you're giving up a first that'll probably be, and it is, a late first in the 23rd overall pick in this year's upcoming draft. You're getting a guy who has the potential to be like a superstar in the NHL, a top line guy. So I think you make that deal most of the time if you're the Leafs. The only scary thing is you're giving up a first round pick, Minton and Robertson, for one player, and there's a chance that Minton and Robertson end up being like one of those guys could end up being a star level or a top line level player. So you're kind of playing the lottery a little bit there. Obviously, it's most likely that McGrody is going to be better than both of those guys and the pick or whatever you end up giving up. But it is a little bit of a risk thinking that there's a chance that one of those guys, especially Fraser Minton, but even Nick Robertson in a change of scenery, you could see him being a very solid player. And if you ultimately end up giving up two middle liners for McGrody, who ends up being a top liner, great. But if McGrody goes down to the middle liner, you're kind of stuck.
For the first round pick, where the Leafs are picking this year, you're getting a better player in return. You're not going to get a player like McGrody at the spot you're picking, right? So that's all well and good. But at Nick, with Nick Robertson in the deal, I still think, like you said, he goes somewhere else, he's going to be a really good player. He is a really good player, just hasn't gotten the opportunity in Toronto, and it's not his fault. And he's, dealt with injuries and all that stuff. And, they have higher end talent now. And obviously Matthew Knies has taken over that spot where he should be realistically on another team. So I could see him being a really good player on another team. I just don't know if it's going to work out in Toronto, right? And then, like we mentioned, Fraser Minton, I think he kind of tops out in the NHL as maybe a third line center. So not a terrible trade. You are giving up a little much, right? All combined, but what do you do to make your team better and younger, right? If he can fill a spot on your team and battle for maybe like a second line wing position.
Yeah, and there's also some rumblings that the Jets want to include Nikolai Ehlers in a package deal with McGrody, so maybe that would be interesting for the Leafs to get them some more some depth and some more scoring on the wings. But let us know in the comments what your thoughts are on all that. Very, very interesting. And let us know what your thoughts are on Marc Savard. See you guys soon.